The morning sun cast long shadows across the barren landscape as Sarah Mitchell adjusted her scope for the 100th time. The wind had been playing tricks on her calculations all week, and today would be no different. At 28, she had already earned a reputation that most snipers twice her age could only dream of achieving. But what she was about to attempt would either cement her legacy forever or destroy everything she had worked for. The military brass had gathered at the observation post, their faces a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. General Harrison, a man who had seen 3 wars and countless impossible missions, shook his head as he lowered his binoculars. 3.8 kilometers, he muttered to his aide. The current world record is 3.5. And she wants to do it 14 times in a row. Sarah's journey to this moment had begun in the wheat fields of Nebraska, where her grandfather had taught her to shoot prairie dogs at distances that seemed impossible to a 10-year-old girl. Old Tom Mitchell had been a Marine sniper in Vietnam, and he saw something special in his granddaughter's steady hands and unwavering focus. While other children played video games, Sarah spent her afternoons learning about wind drift, bullet drop, and the patience required to wait for the perfect shot. Her childhood was marked by tragedy when her parents died in a car accident when she was 15. Tom became her guardian, and their bond deepened through their shared passion for precision shooting. He taught her that shooting wasn't just about pulling a trigger, it was about understanding the environment, reading the signs that nature provided, and having the mental fortitude to execute under pressure. After high school, Sarah enlisted in the Army, much to Tom's initial dismay. He had hoped she would use her skills in competitive shooting, perhaps even the Olympics. But Sarah had different plans. She wanted to serve her country, and she believed her unique abilities could save lives on the battlefield. Basic training was a formality for someone of her caliber. The drill sergeants quickly recognized her exceptional marksmanship skills, and she was fast-tracked into the sniper program. At Fort Benning, she broke every shooting record on the books, often by margins that seemed impossible. Her instructors had never seen anything like it, a natural ability combined with an almost supernatural understanding of ballistics. During her first deployment in Afghanistan, Sarah's reputation grew with each mission. While other snipers celebrated hits at 800 meters, she was consistently engaging targets at over a mile. Her spotter, Corporal Jake Reynolds, became both her closest friend and her biggest advocate. Jake had worked with dozens of snipers, but he had never encountered anyone who could read conditions like Sarah. The mission that would change everything came during her second tour. Intelligence had located a high-value target in a compound surrounded by civilians. Traditional airstrikes were out of the question, and a ground assault would result in significant casualties. The target would only be exposed for a few seconds during his daily routine, and he would be over 2 miles away from the nearest concealed position. Most commanders would have deemed the mission impossible, but Sarah's track record spoke for itself. She had never missed a shot when lives were on the line. The mission was approved, and Sarah and Jake set up in a bombed-out building on a hillside overlooking the valley. The shot required calculations that pushed the boundaries of physics. At that distance, the bullet would take nearly 6 seconds to reach its target. The slightest miscalculation in wind speed, temperature, or humidity could send the bullet several feet off target. Sarah spent hours studying weather patterns, using equipment that most snipers had never even seen. When the moment came, everything went silent in Sarah's mind. She controlled her breathing, felt her heartbeat slow, and squeezed the trigger with the same gentle pressure she had used on prairie dogs 20 years earlier. The target dropped instantly, and the mission was complete without a single civilian casualty. Word of the shot spread quickly through military channels. At 2.1 miles, it was the longest confirmed kill in military history. Sarah found herself thrust into a spotlight she never wanted, with reporters and military officials all wanting to understand how she had achieved the impossible. But fame came with a price. The enemy now knew about the American sniper who could reach out and touch them from unimaginable distances. Sarah's face appeared on wanted posters across 3 countries, and the bounty on her head grew with each confirmed kill. Her missions became more dangerous, and the psychological pressure began to take its toll. The breaking point came during a night operation when Jake was killed by an improvised explosive device while they were moving to a new position. Sarah blamed herself, believing that her reputation had made them a target. She requested immediate transfer back to the United States, and her commanders, recognizing her emotional state, granted the request. Back home, Sarah struggled to adjust to civilian life. The quiet Nebraska farmhouse where she had learned to shoot now felt like a prison. She had nightmares about missed shots and lost friends. Tom, now in his 80s, watched his granddaughter struggle with demons he recognized from his own wartime experience. It was during this dark period that Sarah received an unexpected phone call. Dr. Amanda Chen, a ballistics researcher from MIT, had been studying Sarah's military records and believed her abilities could contribute to advancing sniper technology and training methods. The military had approved a special research project, and they wanted Sarah to be the primary test subject. The project, codenamed Prometheus, aimed to push the boundaries of long-range precision shooting. Using advanced weather monitoring equipment, custom ammunition, and revolutionary rifle designs, they wanted to see just how far human accuracy could be extended. Sarah would work with a team of scientists and engineers to attempt shots that had never been tried before. Initially reluctant, Sarah eventually agreed, partly because she needed purpose in her life and partly because she hoped the research might save other soldiers from experiencing the losses she had endured. The project would take place at a classified facility in Nevada, where the vast desert provided perfect conditions for extreme long-range shooting. The Prometheus team consisted of some of the brightest minds in ballistics and materials science. Dr. Chen led the group, bringing expertise in computational fluid dynamics and atmospheric modeling. Dr. Marcus Webb, a former NASA engineer, contributed knowledge of precision mechanics and environmental control systems. The military provided Colonel Patricia Adams, a career officer with extensive experience in special operations and sniper training. The rifle designed for the project was unlike anything ever built. Custom manufactured by a team of Swiss precision engineers, it incorporated gyroscopic stabilization technology originally developed for spacecraft. The barrel was made from a proprietary alloy that remained consistent across extreme temperature variations. Every component was crafted to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The ammunition was equally revolutionary. Each bullet was individually manufactured and tested, with computer-controlled machinery ensuring perfect consistency in weight, shape, and balance. The powder charges were measured to the individual grain, and the primers were selected based on their precise ignition characteristics. But the most impressive aspect of the project was the environmental monitoring system. An array of weather stations positioned along the bullet's flight path provided real-time data on wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure. This information was fed into a computer model that could predict bullet trajectory with unprecedented accuracy. Sarah's first day at the facility was overwhelming. The technology was impressive, but she worried that it might replace the instinctive skills that had made her successful. Dr. Chen assured her that the equipment was designed to enhance human ability, not replace it. The ultimate decision to take the shot would always rest with the shooter. The initial tests were conducted at relatively modest ranges, 1 and 2 miles. Sarah's performance was flawless, but she found herself relying more on the computer predictions than her own instincts. Dr. Chen encouraged her to trust both the technology and her natural abilities, explaining that the best results would come from combining human intuition with scientific precision. As the weeks passed, the distances grew longer. Sarah consistently hit targets at 2.5 miles, then 3 miles. Each success brought new challenges and refinements to the system. The team discovered that atmospheric conditions at extreme ranges created effects that had never been documented. Bullets would encounter multiple wind layers, temperature inversions, and pressure variations that could push them off course in unpredictable ways. The breakthrough came when Dr. Webb suggested using predictive modeling based on satellite weather data. Instead of just measuring current conditions, they could anticipate how the atmosphere would change during the bullet's 6-second flight time. This innovation allowed Sarah to begin hitting targets consistently at 3.5 miles, matching the current world record. But Sarah wasn't satisfied with matching records, she wanted to shatter them. The team began planning for an attempt at 3.8 miles, a distance that would push every component of their system to its absolute limits. The shot would require perfect conditions, flawless equipment, and execution that left no room for error. Months of preparation went into the record attempt. Weather patterns were studied, equipment was tested and retested, and Sarah practiced until her muscle memory was perfect. The team identified a window of opportunity when atmospheric conditions would be ideal, a rare combination of stable air masses and minimal wind that occurred perhaps once a year. The targets for the record attempt were specially designed to provide clear visual confirmation of hits. Made from ballistic gelatin with distinctive colored centers, they would show unmistakable evidence of bullet impact. High-speed cameras positioned at multiple angles would capture every shot for later analysis. General Harrison's presence at the facility was both an honor and additional pressure. He had been skeptical of the Prometheus project from the beginning, viewing it as an expensive exercise in theoretical science. But Sarah's consistent performance had gradually won him over, and he wanted to witness what might be a historic achievement. The night before the attempt, Sarah couldn't sleep. She walked the grounds of the facility, thinking about Jake and all the soldiers whose lives might be saved if this technology could be perfected. Tom had passed away 6 months earlier, but she could almost hear his voice encouraging her to trust her instincts and make every shot count. As dawn approached, Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her mind. This was what she had trained for her entire life. The technology was impressive, but, ultimately, it would come down to her ability to execute under pressure. She had never missed when it truly mattered, and she wasn't about to start now. The wind was perfect, the temperature stable, and the atmospheric pressure holding steady. Dr. Chen's computer models showed optimal conditions for the next 2 hours. Sarah took her position behind the revolutionary rifle, adjusted the scope one final time, and prepared to attempt the impossible. 14 targets stood at precisely 3.8 kilometers, arranged in a pattern that would test every aspect of her shooting ability. The distance was so great that the targets were barely visible even through the powerful scope. Sarah would have to rely on coordinates, environmental data, and 20 years of shooting experience to guide each bullet to its mark. The first target appeared in her crosshairs as a tiny speck against the desert backdrop. Sarah controlled her breathing, felt her heartbeat slow to its familiar rhythm, and began the mental calculations that had become second nature. The computer provided data, but her instincts would guide the final adjustments. The weight of history pressed down on her shoulders as she prepared to take the first shot. Success would revolutionize long-range shooting and potentially save countless lives in future conflicts. Failure would mean the end of the Prometheus project and possibly her career. Sarah's finger found the trigger, and the world around her faded away. In that moment, nothing existed except her, the rifle, and a target nearly 4 kilometers away. Time seemed suspended as she prepared to attempt what everyone had called impossible. The first shot broke the morning silence with a thunderous crack that echoed across the Nevada desert. Sarah remained perfectly still as the supersonic bullet began its 6-second journey through the atmosphere. At 3.8 kilometers, the projectile would encounter air masses of varying density, crosswinds at different altitudes, and gravitational forces that would pull it earthward over the course of its flight. Dr. Chen monitored the environmental data streaming from sensors positioned along the bullet's path. Wind speed varied from 3 miles per hour at ground level to 12 miles per hour at the midpoint of the trajectory. Temperature differentials created thermal columns that could deflect the bullet by inches, and humidity levels affected air density in ways that most shooters never considered. Through her scope, Sarah watched for the telltale sign of impact. At this distance, she wouldn't hear the bullet strike the target. Sound would take over 11 seconds to travel back to her position. Instead, she relied on visual confirmation, watching for the distinctive puff of ballistic gelatin that would indicate a hit. The seconds stretched like hours until Sarah saw the unmistakable explosion of colored gelatin at the target site. The first shot had found its mark, dead center. A cheer went up from the observation team, but Sarah remained focused. One success meant nothing. She needed 14 consecutive hits to prove that extreme long-range precision was scientifically achievable. General Harrison lowered his binoculars with an expression of grudging respect. He had witnessed incredible feats of marksmanship during his military career, but nothing approaching this level of precision at such an extreme distance. The implications for military tactics were staggering. Enemy commanders would never again feel safe at any distance. Dr. Webb reviewed the telemetry data from the first shot, noting how closely the bullet's actual path matched their computer predictions. The projectile had dropped nearly 40 feet during its flight and drifted 8 inches to the left due to crosswinds. Without the sophisticated environmental modeling system, the shot would have missed by several feet. Sarah chambered the second round, her movements smooth and practiced. The custom ammunition had been manufactured to tolerances that pushed the limits of industrial precision. Each bullet was perfectly balanced, with weight variations measured in milligrams. The powder charge in each cartridge was identical down to individual grains, ensuring consistent muzzle velocity. The second target stood slightly to the right of the first, requiring Sarah to adjust her point of aim while accounting for the subtle differences in wind patterns across the shooting field. The computer model provided updated atmospheric data, but Sarah's experience told her that conditions were gradually shifting. A high-pressure system was moving in from the west, and she could feel the change in air density even before the instruments registered it. This shot felt different from the first, more challenging somehow, as if the atmosphere itself was testing her abilities. Sarah made a microscopic adjustment to her aim, trusting her instincts over the computer's recommendations. The rifle's gyroscopic stabilization system helped counteract the tiny movements that would normally throw off such a precise shot. The second bullet struck home with the same devastating accuracy as the first. Dr. Chen's excitement was visible as she realized that Sarah wasn't just getting lucky, she was demonstrating a level of skill that bordered on supernatural. The combination of human intuition and scientific precision was proving more effective than either approach alone. Colonel Adams observed Sarah's technique with professional interest. As a former special operations officer, she understood the psychological pressures of high-stakes shooting. Most snipers would have been overwhelmed by the attention and expectations, but Sarah seemed to thrive under pressure. Her breathing remained controlled, her movements deliberate and confident. The third and fourth shots followed in quick succession, each finding its target with mechanical precision. Sarah was entering what athletes call the zone, a state of perfect focus where conscious thought fades away and instinct takes control. She could feel the wind patterns shifting, sense the subtle changes in atmospheric pressure, and anticipate how these factors would affect each bullet's flight. Dr. Chen's research had identified Sarah as what she termed a ballistic savant, someone with an almost supernatural ability to understand projectile physics. Brain scans had shown unusual activity in regions associated with spatial reasoning and mathematical calculation. Sarah's mind unconsciously performed ballistic computations that would challenge a computer. The fifth target presented a new challenge. It was positioned at a slightly different elevation, requiring Sarah to adjust for the additional gravitational effect on the bullet's trajectory. At this distance, even small changes in angle could result in significant point-of-impact shifts. Sarah's calculations had to account for the Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth itself influencing the bullet's path. Military observers from allied nations had quietly joined the viewing party. Word of the demonstration had spread through intelligence channels, and representatives from the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia were present to witness what might be a revolution in long-range engagement capabilities. The strategic implications were enormous. Traditional safe distances for enemy commanders would need to be completely reconsidered. Sarah's sixth shot struck its target with the same devastating accuracy as the previous 5. The pattern was becoming clear. This wasn't a fluke or an unusually lucky day. Sarah had somehow managed to master the variables involved in extreme long-range shooting to a degree that seemed almost impossible. The complexity of the shots was staggering when considered from a physics perspective. The bullets were traveling at over 3,000 feet per second initially, but atmospheric drag steadily reduced their velocity throughout the flight. Crosswinds pushed them laterally while gravity pulled them downward. Air density variations caused by temperature and humidity differences created unpredictable deflection forces. Dr. Webb's engineering background helped him appreciate the mechanical precision required for such accuracy. The rifle itself was a masterpiece of manufacturing technology, with a barrel that maintained perfect straightness despite temperature changes and a trigger mechanism that released with exactly 4 pounds of pressure every time. The scope was mounted with fixtures that eliminated any possibility of movement or vibration. Shot number 7 required Sarah to demonstrate her adaptability as wind conditions began changing more rapidly. A weather front was approaching from the northwest, bringing with it air mass instabilities that would challenge even the most sophisticated ballistic computer. Sarah felt the change before the instruments registered it, adjusting her point of aim based on subtle environmental cues that she couldn't even articulate. The bullet found its mark despite the increasingly challenging conditions. Sarah's ability to read environmental signs was proving to be just as important as the high-tech equipment surrounding her. Years of shooting in variable conditions had taught her to recognize the subtle indicators that preceded wind shifts, changes in grass movement, dust patterns, and even the behavior of insects. General Harrison was beginning to understand that he was witnessing something unprecedented in military history. The concept of a sniper engaging targets at nearly 4 kilometers with perfect accuracy would fundamentally change how military operations were planned and executed. Enemy leadership would need to reconsider their assumptions about safe distances and protective positioning. The 8th shot came as the wind conditions reached their most challenging point of the day. Gusts were creating turbulence at multiple altitudes along the bullet's flight path, and the computer model was struggling to predict the complex interactions between different air masses. Sarah relied increasingly on her intuitive understanding of ballistics, making adjustments that seemed to defy the scientific data. Dr. Chen realized that she was observing something that couldn't be fully explained by current ballistic science. Sarah's success rate suggested an understanding of atmospheric physics that went beyond formal education or computer modeling. It was as if she could somehow sense the three-dimensional structure of the air mass through which her bullets traveled. The 9th target fell to another perfect shot, and the observers began to realize they were witnessing history. No one had ever demonstrated this level of consistency at such an extreme range. The military applications were obvious, but the scientific implications were equally significant. Sarah was providing data about extreme long-range ballistics that had never been collected before. Shot number 10 required Sarah to compensate for a significant change in atmospheric pressure as the weather front continued its approach. The computer model predicted a 6-inch deflection to the right, but Sarah's instincts suggested the actual effect would be smaller. She split the difference, making an adjustment that satisfied both the scientific data and her intuitive understanding. The bullet struck slightly left of center but well within the target zone. Sarah felt a moment of concern. It was her first shot that hadn't been perfectly centered. The observers barely noticed the minor deviation, but Sarah's perfectionist nature made her acutely aware of even the smallest imperfection in her performance. Colonel Adams recognized the psychological challenge Sarah was facing. After 9 consecutive perfect shots, the pressure to maintain that standard could become overwhelming. Lesser shooters often fell apart under such pressure, but Sarah seemed to thrive on the challenge. Her 11th shot was once again perfectly centered, as if the previous minor deviation had only motivated her to greater precision. The wind was becoming increasingly unpredictable as multiple air masses began interacting over the shooting range. Dust devils formed and dissipated along the bullet's flight path, creating momentary turbulence that could easily deflect a projectile traveling at such an extreme distance. Sarah's 12th shot somehow navigated through this atmospheric chaos to find its target with unwavering accuracy. Dr. Webb was frantically taking notes, trying to document every aspect of Sarah's technique for future analysis. Her breathing pattern never varied, her trigger control was mechanically consistent, and her ability to read environmental conditions seemed almost supernatural. The engineering team would spend months analyzing the data collected during this demonstration. Shot 13 presented the ultimate challenge as a sudden gust front preceded the approaching storm system. Wind speeds spiked momentarily to over 20 miles per hour, creating conditions that would normally make accurate shooting impossible at such ranges. Sarah held her fire for nearly a minute, waiting for the turbulence to settle enough to attempt the shot. When she finally squeezed the trigger, the bullet seemed to ride the edge of the wind current, using the air mass itself as a guidance system. The shot struck the target with the same precision as all the others, demonstrating Sarah's ability to adapt to changing conditions in real time. Only one target remained, and the pressure was mounting. 13 consecutive hits at 3.8 kilometers was already beyond anything previously achieved, but Sarah wanted to complete the full demonstration. A perfect 14 for 14 score would leave no doubt about the feasibility of extreme long-range precision shooting. The final target seemed to mock her from across the desert expanse. Wind conditions were becoming increasingly unstable as the storm front approached, and the light was beginning to change as clouds moved across the sun. Every environmental factor that could complicate the shot was coming into play simultaneously. Sarah took her time with the final shot, analyzing every available piece of data while trusting her instincts about conditions that couldn't be measured by instruments. The moment had to be perfect. There would be no opportunity for a follow-up shot if this one missed. As she prepared to fire, Sarah thought about all the people who had contributed to this moment. Her grandfather Tom, who had taught her to shoot prairie dogs in Nebraska wheat fields. Jake Reynolds, who had died believing in her abilities. Dr. Chen and the Prometheus team, who had given her the tools to push beyond previously imagined limits. The 14th shot would determine whether Sarah Mitchell became a footnote in military history or a legend whose achievements would inspire future generations of precision shooters. Everything she had learned, every shot she had ever fired, had led to this moment. The 14th target wavered in Sarah's scope as atmospheric disturbances created mirage effects across the desert floor. Heat waves rising from the sun-baked earth bent light rays, making precise aim nearly impossible through conventional methods. But Sarah had learned to look beyond the obvious, to read the subtle signs that revealed true target position despite optical illusions. Dr. Chen watched the environmental displays with growing concern. Wind gusts were spiking to 25 miles per hour, and the approaching storm front was creating pressure differentials that their computer models struggled to predict. Any reasonable person would postpone the shot until conditions improved, but Sarah seemed determined to complete the demonstration under these challenging circumstances. The pressure was immense, not just from the weather but from the weight of expectation. Military officials from multiple countries were present, along with representatives from defense contractors who understood the commercial implications of successful extreme long-range shooting technology. Billions of dollars in future contracts hung in the balance, and Sarah was the only person who could prove the concept was viable. General Harrison found himself silently rooting for the young sniper who had already exceeded every reasonable expectation. 13 consecutive hits at 3.8 kilometers represented a feat that would have been considered science fiction just years earlier. But he could see the determination in Sarah's eyes. She wasn't satisfied with merely breaking records. She wanted perfection. The wind meter showed gusts varying from 8 to 26 miles per hour, with no discernible pattern to the fluctuations. Traditional ballistic calculations became meaningless under such conditions, as the bullet would encounter different wind speeds and directions throughout its 6-second flight. Sarah would have to rely entirely on her intuitive understanding of air movement and projectile physics. Colonel Adams recognized the mental challenge Sarah was facing. After 13 perfect shots, the psychological pressure to maintain that standard could be paralyzing. Many elite shooters had collapsed under similar circumstances, their skills abandoned them at the critical moment. But Sarah's breathing remained steady, her grip on the rifle unchanged, her focus apparently unshakable. The custom ammunition for this final shot had been selected with particular care. Dr. Webb had personally inspected the bullet for microscopic imperfections, measuring its weight to fractions of a grain and verifying its perfect balance. The powder charge had been weighed 3 times, and the primer had been tested for consistent ignition characteristics. Every possible variable had been controlled except for the chaotic atmosphere between rifle and target. Sarah's mind processed information that couldn't be quantified by instruments. She felt the subtle pressure changes on her skin that indicated shifting air masses. She noticed the way dust moved across the desert floor, revealing wind patterns at ground level that might extend vertically into the bullet's flight path. Years of shooting in challenging conditions had taught her to read these environmental signatures. The spotter's scope showed thermal columns rising from the desert floor like invisible tornadoes, each one capable of deflecting a bullet by several inches. Sarah had to time her shot to coincide with a moment of relative atmospheric stability, when the various turbulent forces might briefly cancel each other out rather than compound their effects. Dr. Chen's research had shown that elite shooters like Sarah possessed enhanced sensory perception that allowed them to detect environmental changes before instruments could measure them. Brain imaging studies revealed unusual activity in regions associated with spatial processing and predictive modeling. Sarah's nervous system had apparently adapted to function as a biological ballistic computer. The rifle's gyroscopic stabilization system was working at its maximum capacity to counteract the effects of wind-induced vibration. Microscopic adjustments to the barrel's position helped maintain perfect alignment despite the challenging conditions, but the system had limits. If wind speeds exceeded 30 miles per hour, even the advanced technology would be overwhelmed. Sarah made a final adjustment to her scope, compensating for the changing light conditions as clouds moved across the sun. Shadows and bright spots created optical illusions that could easily fool even experienced shooters, but Sarah had learned to look through these distractions to find the true target position. The 14th target seemed impossibly small through the scope at 3.8 kilometers distance. Even with maximum magnification, it appeared as little more than a speck against the desert backdrop. Sarah would have to rely on precise coordinates and mathematical calculations rather than visual confirmation of target details. Her finger found the trigger with the same gentle pressure she had used for the previous 13 shots. The rifle's trigger mechanism was a masterpiece of precision engineering, braking at exactly 4 pounds of pressure with no perceptible movement before release. Sarah had practiced with this exact setup for months, developing muscle memory that functioned independently of conscious thought. The approaching storm created electrical charges in the atmosphere that could theoretically affect a bullet's flight path. While the effect would be minimal, at extreme ranges even tiny influences could accumulate to significant point-of-impact shifts. Sarah's shot would have to account for factors that most shooters never considered. Wind conditions continued to fluctuate as Sarah prepared for the final shot. A sudden lull provided a brief window of opportunity, with sustained winds dropping to under 10 miles per hour for the first time in 30 minutes. Sarah recognized that this might be her best chance, but she also knew that wind conditions 4 kilometers away might be completely different from those at her position. The mathematical complexity of the shot was staggering when considered in detail. The bullet would follow a parabolic trajectory modified by air resistance, crosswinds, thermal effects, barometric pressure variations, and even the rotation of the Earth itself. Computer models could approximate these factors, but the chaotic nature of atmospheric turbulence made precise predictions impossible. Dr. Webb monitored the structural stress on the rifle as wind loads tested the limits of its mounting system. The weapon's carbon fiber stock and titanium action were designed to remain stable under extreme conditions, but sustained wind pressure could gradually shift the rifle's 0 point. Sarah would have to complete her shot before these tiny movements accumulated to measurable errors. The high-speed cameras were positioned to capture the moment of impact from multiple angles. At 3.8 kilometers, even these sophisticated instruments would barely be able to resolve the bullet's strike on the target. The footage would require detailed analysis to determine the exact point of impact and confirm the precision of Sarah's shooting. Sarah's breathing pattern never varied despite the mounting pressure. 4 counts in, hold for 4 counts, 4 counts out, hold for 4 counts. This rhythm had become so automatic that she could maintain it even while performing complex ballistic calculations. Her heart rate remained steady at 60 beats per minute, the same rate she maintained during practice sessions. The scope's reticle seemed to dance slightly as atmospheric disturbances created small vibrations in the rifle. Sarah had learned to fire during the natural respiratory pause when her body was completely still, but the external environmental forces created challenges that no amount of personal control could eliminate. Military observers understood that they were witnessing a demonstration that could revolutionize battlefield tactics. Traditional concepts of safe distance would become obsolete if snipers could consistently engage targets at ranges approaching 4 kilometers. Enemy commanders would need to reconsider their operational security procedures and protective positioning protocols. The ballistic gelatin targets were specially formulated to provide clear visual evidence of bullet impacts. The colored centers would produce distinctive signatures when struck, allowing observers to confirm hits even at extreme distances. High-speed photography would capture the moment of impact in slow motion, revealing the devastating effects of a precisely placed projectile. Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her mind as she prepared for the final shot. This was the mental state that had carried her through dozens of combat missions and countless training exercises. External pressures faded away until only she, the rifle, and the distant target existed in her consciousness. The computer display showed atmospheric conditions fluctuating wildly as the storm front approached. Wind speeds, air pressure, temperature, and humidity were all changing rapidly, making ballistic predictions increasingly unreliable. Sarah would have to trust her instincts and her decades of shooting experience more than the sophisticated technology surrounding her. Dr. Chen realized that this final shot would provide the ultimate test of their research hypothesis. Could human intuition and technological assistance combine to achieve accuracy that neither could accomplish alone? The answer would determine the future direction of precision shooting research and development. The rifle's carbon fiber barrel had been precisely manufactured to maintain consistent internal dimensions despite temperature variations. Even tiny changes in barrel bore diameter could significantly affect bullet velocity and accuracy at extreme ranges. The custom ammunition had been loaded to match the exact specifications of this particular weapon system. Sarah's shooting position had been carefully engineered to provide maximum stability while allowing for the natural movements required during the shot sequence. The bipod legs were adjustable to accommodate the uneven desert terrain, and the rear support bag was filled with a special polymer that provided consistent cushioning regardless of temperature. The final target stood against a backdrop of gathering storm clouds, creating a dramatic contrast that actually helped with target identification. Sarah could see the dark clouds building on the horizon, and she knew that weather conditions would only deteriorate as the morning progressed. This shot had to be taken now or not at all. Wind flags positioned along the bullet's flight path showed conflicting information about air movement at different points along the trajectory. What appeared to be a slight left-to-right wind at Sarah's position might be a right-to-left wind at the target area. Sarah had to synthesize all this conflicting data into a single point of aim that would account for the complex atmospheric conditions. The moment of truth had arrived. 13 perfect shots had proven that extreme long-range precision was possible, but 14 consecutive hits would establish a new standard for human marksmanship achievement. Sarah's finger began its slow, steady pressure on the trigger as she prepared to attempt what everyone had called impossible. The trigger broke with mechanical precision, sending a 250-grain bullet streaking across the Nevada desert at over 3,000 feet per second. Sarah remained frozen in position, following through with perfect form as the projectile began its 6-second journey through increasingly turbulent atmosphere. The rifle's recoil was barely perceptible thanks to its advanced muzzle brake and recoil management system, allowing Sarah to maintain visual contact with the target area. Through her scope, Sarah watched for the telltale sign of impact while her mind automatically began calculating the variables that would affect this final shot. The bullet would encounter crosswinds varying from 10 to 25 miles per hour, temperature differentials of 15 degrees between ground level and the midpoint of its trajectory, and humidity variations that would subtly alter air density along the flight path. Dr. Chen monitored the real-time atmospheric data streaming from sensors positioned along the bullet's route. The environmental conditions were the most challenging they had recorded during the entire demonstration. Wind shear between different altitude levels created turbulence that could deflect the projectile by several inches, while thermal columns rising from the desert floor added random forces that defied prediction. The seconds stretched into eternity as observers waited for visual confirmation of impact. General Harrison gripped his binoculars with white knuckles, understanding that this single shot would determine whether the Prometheus project continued or was relegated to an expensive footnote in military research history. The implications extended far beyond simple marksmanship. This demonstration could revolutionize how future conflicts were fought. High-speed cameras positioned at multiple angles captured every microsecond of the bullet's flight, recording data that would be analyzed for months to understand exactly how Sarah achieved such impossible accuracy. The projectile's path through the atmosphere created minute pressure waves that were barely detectable by the most sensitive instruments, yet somehow Sarah had learned to predict and compensate for these effects. At the 3-second mark of the bullet's flight, crosswinds reached their maximum intensity as the approaching storm front created chaotic air movements across the desert landscape. The projectile encountered a wind shear zone where air masses moving in opposite directions created turbulence that would have destroyed the accuracy of any conventional shot. Yet Sarah's bullet somehow maintained its trajectory toward the distant target. Colonel Adams recognized the psychological complexity of what Sarah had accomplished. Shooting 14 consecutive shots under such pressure required not just physical skill but mental fortitude that few people possessed. Each successive shot had increased the stakes exponentially, yet Sarah's performance had never wavered. Her ability to maintain focus under such intense scrutiny was as remarkable as her marksmanship skills. The ballistic gelatin target stood motionless in the distance, waiting to reveal whether Sarah had achieved the impossible or whether the laws of physics would finally assert their dominance over human skill and determination. The colored center would provide unmistakable evidence of impact location, but, at this extreme range, even the slightest miss would be magnified into a complete failure. Dr. Webb's engineering analysis of the shot revealed the incredible precision required at every level of the system. The rifle's barrel had to remain perfectly straight despite wind loads that created lateral forces measured in pounds. The scope mounting system had to maintain alignment to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Even the bipod legs had to resist microscopic movements that could throw off the shot. At the 4-second mark, Sarah's bullet encountered the most severe atmospheric disturbance of its flight. A dust devil had formed along the trajectory, creating a spinning column of air that could easily deflect a projectile by several feet. Observers watched in fascination as the nearly invisible vortex moved across the bullet's path just moments before impact. The mathematical probability of success under such conditions was virtually zero according to conventional ballistic calculations. Computer models suggested that the combination of environmental factors would make accurate shooting impossible, yet Sarah had somehow managed to synthesize all these variables into a successful engagement strategy. Her success challenged fundamental assumptions about the limits of human marksmanship. Military representatives from allied nations understood that they were witnessing a potential revolution in long-range engagement capabilities. Traditional concepts of battlefield geometry would need to be completely reconsidered if snipers could consistently engage targets at ranges approaching 4 kilometers. The strategic implications were staggering. No enemy position would be truly safe from precision fire. The custom ammunition had performed flawlessly throughout the demonstration, with each cartridge delivering identical ballistic performance despite the extreme demands placed on the system. The bullets maintained their stability throughout their supersonic flight, resisting the aerodynamic forces that typically cause projectiles to tumble at extended ranges. Manufacturing tolerances measured in millionths of an inch had proven their worth. Sarah's breathing remained perfectly controlled as she waited for confirmation of impact. Years of training had taught her to maintain physiological stability even under extreme stress, but the magnitude of this moment tested every aspect of her mental conditioning. 13 perfect shots had established her capabilities, but this 14th shot would determine her legacy. At the 5-second mark, the bullet began its final descent toward the target. Gravitational forces had pulled it nearly 40 feet below its initial trajectory, while atmospheric drag had reduced its velocity to approximately 1,800 feet per second. Yet the projectile maintained its deadly accuracy, guided by calculations that seemed to transcend conventional physics. The approaching storm created electrical charges in the atmosphere that added another layer of complexity to the shot. While the electromagnetic effects would be minimal, at extreme ranges even tiny influences could accumulate into significant trajectory changes. Sarah had somehow managed to account for factors that most ballistic experts considered unmeasurable. Dr. Chen's research had identified Sarah as possessing what she termed enhanced environmental sensitivity, an ability to detect atmospheric conditions that couldn't be measured by conventional instruments. Brain imaging studies revealed unusual neural activity in regions associated with spatial processing and predictive modeling, suggesting that Sarah's nervous system had adapted to function as a biological ballistic computer. The rifle's gyroscopic stabilization system had worked at maximum capacity throughout the shot sequence, making thousands of microscopic adjustments to maintain perfect alignment despite wind-induced vibrations. The technology represented years of development work by Swiss precision engineers, yet it was Sarah's human intuition that ultimately determined success or failure. Wind flags positioned at various distances showed the chaotic nature of atmospheric conditions along the bullet's flight path. Air masses were moving in different directions at different altitudes, creating a three-dimensional puzzle that would challenge even the most sophisticated computer models. Sarah had somehow managed to read these complex patterns and adjust her point of aim accordingly. The target seemed to grow larger in Sarah's scope as she waited for the moment of impact. At 3.8 kilometers distance, the ballistic gelatin structure appeared as little more than a speck against the desert backdrop, yet her mental image of its exact position remained crystal clear. Visualization techniques learned during years of precision shooting had created a perfect mental map of the target area. At the 6-second mark, Sarah saw the unmistakable explosion of colored gelatin that confirmed impact. The 14th shot had found its mark with the same devastating accuracy as the previous 13, completing what many observers would later describe as the greatest demonstration of human marksmanship in history. The impossible had become reality through a combination of human skill, scientific precision, and technological innovation. General Harrison's binoculars revealed a perfect hit dead center in the target's colored core. The implications of what he had witnessed would require complete reconsideration of military tactical doctrines and operational security procedures. Sarah Mitchell had just redefined the possible in terms of precision engagement at extreme ranges. Dr. Chen's excitement was barely contained as she realized that their research hypothesis had been validated beyond their most optimistic expectations. The combination of human intuition and technological assistance had achieved results that neither approach could have accomplished alone. Years of theoretical work had been proven in the most dramatic way possible. The high-speed cameras had captured the moment of impact in extraordinary detail, revealing the devastating effects of a precisely placed projectile traveling at nearly 1,800 feet per second. The ballistic gelatin target disintegrated in a shower of colored fragments, providing unmistakable visual confirmation of Sarah's marksmanship achievement. Colonel Adams understood that she had witnessed a moment that would be studied in military academies for generations to come. Sarah's demonstration had established new standards for human performance under extreme pressure while proving that technological advancement could enhance rather than replace human capabilities. The storm clouds gathering on the horizon seemed to applaud Sarah's achievement with distant thunder, as if nature itself was acknowledging the remarkable feat that had just been accomplished. 14 consecutive hits at 3.8 kilometers represented a level of precision that challenged fundamental assumptions about the limits of human marksmanship. Dr. Webb's instruments had recorded every aspect of the demonstration, creating a database of information that would guide future research and development efforts. The engineering challenges overcome during the project had pushed multiple technologies to their absolute limits, resulting in innovations that would benefit civilian and military applications for decades to come. The aftermath of Sarah's achievement rippled through military and scientific communities worldwide with the force of her supersonic bullets. Within hours of the demonstration, encrypted communications carried news of the impossible feat to defense ministries across the globe. 14 consecutive hits at 3.8 kilometers had shattered every assumption about the practical limits of precision shooting, forcing a complete recalculation of battlefield tactics and strategic planning. General Harrison found himself fielding calls from Pentagon officials who initially refused to believe the reports. The concept of consistent accuracy at such extreme ranges challenged fundamental military doctrines that had remained unchanged for generations. Traditional safe distances for command posts, supply lines, and strategic installations would need to be completely reconsidered in light of Sarah's demonstration. Dr. Chen's laboratory became the epicenter of a scientific revolution as researchers from universities and defense contractors sought access to the data collected during the Prometheus project. The atmospheric modeling techniques developed for the demonstration had applications extending far beyond military use, with potential benefits for meteorology, aerospace engineering, and even climate research. The rifle technology showcased during Sarah's achievement represented years of development work by Swiss precision engineers who had pushed manufacturing tolerances to their absolute limits. Orders for similar weapons systems began flooding in from military units and law enforcement agencies worldwide, though few believed they could find shooters capable of exploiting the technology's full potential. Sarah's personal transformation from traumatized veteran to scientific pioneer had been as remarkable as her marksmanship achievement. The months spent working with the Prometheus team had given her a sense of purpose that extended beyond individual accomplishment to advancing human knowledge and potentially saving lives in future conflicts. The ballistic gelatin targets, now reduced to fragments scattered across the Nevada desert, had served their purpose as silent witnesses to an unprecedented display of human capability. High-speed photography revealed the devastating precision of each impact, with bullet holes clustered in patterns that defied statistical probability at such extreme ranges. Dr. Webb's engineering analysis of the demonstration identified dozens of technological innovations that could be applied to other precision systems. The gyroscopic stabilization technology developed for the rifle had potential applications in aerospace, manufacturing, and scientific instrumentation where microscopic movements could compromise system performance. Colonel Adams received orders to establish a new training program based on the principles demonstrated during Sarah's achievement. The integration of advanced technology with human intuition would become the foundation for a new generation of precision shooters, though few were expected to approach Sarah's unique combination of natural talent and acquired skill. The atmospheric monitoring system developed for the project represented a breakthrough in environmental sensing technology. Real-time measurement of wind patterns, temperature variations, and humidity levels along extended trajectories had applications in aviation, weather forecasting, and environmental research that extended far beyond military use. Military tacticians struggled to comprehend the implications of consistent accuracy at 3.8-kilometer ranges. Traditional concepts of standoff distance, protective positioning, and operational security would require fundamental revision. No enemy commander could feel safe at any distance if Sarah's techniques could be replicated by other shooters. The custom ammunition manufactured for the demonstration established new standards for precision manufacturing in the firearms industry. Computer-controlled production techniques ensured consistency in weight, balance, and aerodynamic properties that pushed the boundaries of what was previously considered possible in mass production. Sarah's achievement attracted attention from unexpected quarters as Olympic shooting officials inquired about adapting the technology for competitive use. The International Shooting Sports Federation began discussions about establishing new categories for extreme long-range precision shooting, though safety considerations would limit civilian applications. The psychological aspects of Sarah's performance fascinated sports psychologists and military trainers who recognized that technical skills alone couldn't explain her success under such extreme pressure. Her ability to maintain focus during the 14-shot sequence demonstrated mental conditioning techniques that could benefit performers in many high-stress professions. Dr. Chen's research into the neurological basis of Sarah's abilities revealed brain activity patterns that challenged conventional understanding of human cognitive capabilities. The discovery suggested that some individuals possessed enhanced spatial processing abilities that could be developed through proper training and environmental conditioning. The Prometheus project's success attracted funding from sources that had previously been skeptical about extreme long-range shooting research. Government agencies and private investors recognized the potential for applications extending beyond military use into areas such as search and rescue, scientific research, and industrial precision systems. General Harrison's initial skepticism had been completely transformed by witnessing Sarah's demonstration. He became the project's strongest advocate within military leadership, arguing that the technology and techniques developed could provide decisive advantages in future conflicts while potentially reducing casualties through more precise engagement capabilities. The storm system that had threatened to disrupt Sarah's final shots eventually passed over the test facility, bringing rain that washed away the physical evidence of her achievement. But the impact of those 14 perfect shots would endure in the memories of everyone who witnessed them and in the scientific data that would guide future research efforts. International attention focused on the Nevada facility as defense analysts attempted to understand the strategic implications of the demonstration. Allied nations requested briefings on the technology and techniques, while potential adversaries began developing countermeasures for a capability they had never previously considered possible. Sarah's personal story resonated with military personnel worldwide who recognized the dedication required to achieve such extraordinary skill levels. Her journey from Nebraska farm girl to precision shooting pioneer inspired a new generation of snipers who understood that technological advancement could enhance rather than replace human capabilities. The rifle used for the demonstration was carefully preserved as a historical artifact, its carbon fiber stock and titanium action representing the pinnacle of precision manufacturing technology. Museum curators recognized that future generations would study the weapon to understand how human ingenuity had overcome seemingly impossible technical challenges. Dr. Webb's documentation of the project filled thousands of pages with technical specifications, environmental data, and performance analysis that would guide weapons development for decades to come. The integration of multiple advanced technologies had created synergistic effects that exceeded the sum of individual components. The 14 targets, reconstructed from fragments collected across the desert, would be displayed in military museums as evidence of human achievement under extreme conditions. Each impact point told the story of a bullet that had defied atmospheric chaos to find its mark with mechanical precision. Sarah's achievement earned recognition from unexpected sources as she received invitations to speak at scientific conferences, military academies, and technology symposiums. Her unique perspective on the integration of human intuition with advanced technology provided insights that benefited researchers across multiple disciplines. The legacy of the Prometheus project extended beyond military applications as civilian researchers adapted the atmospheric modeling techniques for weather prediction, climate studies, and aerospace applications. The precision manufacturing methods developed for the custom ammunition found uses in industries requiring extremely tight tolerances. Years later, military historians would debate whether Sarah's demonstration represented an evolutionary advancement in human capability or a revolutionary breakthrough that fundamentally changed the nature of precision engagement. The consensus emerged that she had achieved something that transcended normal performance boundaries through a unique combination of natural talent, intensive training, and technological enhancement. The Nevada facility where Sarah accomplished the impossible became a pilgrimage site for precision shooters worldwide who sought to understand the secrets of extreme long-range accuracy. Though few could hope to replicate her achievement, many found inspiration in her demonstration that dedicated preparation and unwavering focus could overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. Sarah's 14 consecutive hits at 3.8 kilometers established a benchmark that would stand unchallenged for decades, not because the technology couldn't be replicated, but because few individuals possessed the unique combination of physical skills, mental conditioning, and intuitive understanding required to achieve such precision under extreme conditions. The storm clouds that had threatened to disrupt the final shot eventually gave way to clear skies, as if nature itself was acknowledging that something extraordinary had occurred in the Nevada desert. Sarah Mitchell had proven that with proper preparation, advanced technology, and unwavering determination, even the impossible could become achievable reality. Her legacy would inspire future generations of precision shooters, scientists, and engineers who understood that human potential combined with technological innovation could overcome challenges that seemed impossible by conventional standards. The 14 targets that fell to 14 perfect shots had become symbols of what could be accomplished when human skill met scientific precision in pursuit of the impossible. The desert wind carried the echoes of Sarah's achievement across vast landscapes, spreading the story of a woman who had redefined the possible through dedication, skill, and an unwavering belief that impossibility was merely another challenge to be overcome through careful preparation and flawless execution. Sarah finally allowed herself to relax as confirmation of the final hit reached the observation post. She had accomplished something that experts had declared impossible, proving that human determination combined with scientific precision could overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. The 14 targets had fallen to 14 perfect shots, establishing a new benchmark for extreme long-range marksmanship. The desert wind carried Sarah's triumph across the vast landscape, spreading news of an achievement that would inspire future generations of precision shooters. She had proven that with proper preparation, advanced technology, and unwavering dedication, even the impossible could become possible. The legend of Sarah Mitchell and her 14 perfect shots at 3.8 kilometers would endure long after the targets had been replaced and the equipment upgraded. As observers began to comprehend the magnitude of what they had witnessed, Sarah remained characteristically humble about her achievement. For her, this demonstration was simply the culmination of a lifetime spent pursuing perfection in the demanding art of precision shooting. She had honored the memory of her grandfather Tom, her fallen comrade Jake Reynolds, and everyone who had believed in her ability to achieve the impossible.